It's Billy Turriff. I'm a full-time property investor and developer. This is a number of series of technical interviews I'm doing with people who really help me in terms of setting the strategy for my business and also executing my strategy. I'm really privileged to be here with Simon Zutshi.
Thank you, Billy.
Today. I've worked with Simon since 2015, I think now.
Yes, that's right.
A number of different areas. One, I really got educated by Simon, so I took part in Mastermind 19. Which,
yes.
What number are you up to now?
We're now on 28, starting 29 April 2020.
Wow, that's mad.
Yeah.
But that was really the leverage for me that helped me move from being kind of a part-time investor, corporate world, to full-time investor that I am now.
And also, let's just not underestimate that, because you were already investing in Liverpool and you kind of knew what you were doing student lets, which I like as well. But you were living in Dubai,
6,000 kilometres away,
and commuting to here in Birmingham once a month, and it just goes to show you can invest remotely if you tap into the right network, and you did phenomenally well, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, it was a busy year. I think like 30 nights I actually slept in an aeroplane, but it was worth it. I know one of the things you talk about is you kind of work hard for 1 year.
Yes.
And that was my view. I wanted to give it kind of full
and you certainly
1
did.
year,
put everything in,
full-time job, this, and that gave me the emphasis to then get out.
Yeah.
So I've had great experience with you in that field. I've also been lucky enough, though, as kind of one of your other businesses is Crowd Property, quite an innovative finance service, and I've invested in that, and I've also been lucky enough to borrow money from that for 3 of our projects.
And have you been paid back as well, which is even better?
I've been paid back, and I've paid everyone else back. So it's great, and it's also, it's helped in marketing. It's also helped to get investors.
Yeah. It's a great way to raise your awareness as well as raise funds, isn't it?
It is, and also, and that bit's key in it, but I've also find it great just in terms of some of the staff you've got there. It's property people, so people like Andrew Hall. When we're looking at contracts, you've actually got someone that you can talk through the project with, and when to draw, when to get the monitoring sphere, what you need to look at.
And it's being direct to the decision makers.
Correct, and it's technical advice and on the legal side as well. So so it's been great. So I've kind of worked with you in lots of different ways, but for anyone who's kind of maybe new to property, do you want to maybe just give a brief introduction to yourself?
Yeah, so very quickly, so I started investing back in 1995, and at that point I just started work here in Birmingham at Cadbury's as a graduate trainee. It was my dream job, and I thought I'm going to be there for life, basically, as that's what you kind of believe, right? And as soon as I started work, I bought a house to live in Selly Oak, where I'd been a student. It's very close to Bourneville, where Cadbury's are based. And I bought a house bigger than I needed, and I rented 2 of the rooms to my friends who were still at university studying. And I realised that the rent they paid me covered the mortgage and pretty much most of the bills. So I was kind of living for free. So I had this great job, and I loved Cadbury's, loved the people, loved the product, but I was saving most of my salary. And I also had a part-time business running student nightclub events in Birmingham, which is a really good, fun business. I had this cash building up my business bank account. And my bank manager said to me, this is when you knew who your bank manager was and they knew who you were. So long time ago.
Archie would say the olden days.
Yeah, exactly, definitely olden days. And he said, I said, I think I want to buy another property. So he sent around this financial advisor, and this was this was 1998.
Yeah, so just as the market was
just
starting
when buy-to-let mortgages were going. But the guy didn't know about buy-to-let mortgages, and because I was buying a second house, I had to get a second residential. I had to put 30% in. But I actually had that money because I'd saved my salary, and I had some money from the business. So I was able to buy that second house because of it. And so I moved out of the first house. I kept it to rent to students. And then I moved into my second house with my friends. And that first house, I still own that house. And I became a student landlord in 1998. And I think that students in the right area are some of the best tenants you can possibly have. I know you like lots of students as well, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you also get the multi-let return, but things like guarantors, they come in one group. Yeah, there can be a little bit of refurb work, but some of that's good as well, because it means you get into the property every year and you get to keep it up to scratch, whereas you've got a house and you've just got to do room by room. It can actually
otherwise, exactly. And the reality is they are going to have parties in your house, so don't worry about it. It's going to happen, isn't it? So I did that, and at that point, Billy, I realised that when you own a property, what happens is it's like having your own cash machine. because you receive rent, you've got to pay the mortgage and the insurance and the maintenance, and in my case, management fee. I don't manage any of my properties myself because I don't want to be a full-time landlord. I want to do what I want to do, right? So property is a vehicle for me to allow me to do what I want. And but at the end of each month, you've got some profit. And if you get enough of these little cash machines, you can get to a point where you can replace your income. So I was able to leave my corporate job in 2001 after about 5.5 years. And you know, it was a hard decision because I like Cadbury's, I like the people, I love the product. But you know, I didn't like getting up early in the morning.
Well, I could tell that you were late today.
I was a bit late today. I did actually get up at 6 this morning, but you know what? Now I get up because I want to get up.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
It's totally different. I get up because I want to get up, you know. So fast forward a few years. Now I didn't quite replace my income in 2001, but I had enough for me to say, you know what? I know this works. I'm sure I can do this better.
What was the point when it actually clicked? You know, because I guess at that point, I'm sure Rich Dad Poor Dad was out there, but I mean, you really started the education.
I actually only read Rich Dad Poor Dad in about 2002.
Okay.
So it came after, and I read it and thought, this makes a lot of sense. Hey, this is what I've done.
Yeah.
You know.
So
and then
was it just a case of then buy the house, it's making some money, and then you kind of saw the momentum.
You know what it was, Billy? You know what it was? I think back about it, saying what got me into property investing, because none of my family have ever invested, apart really from their own home. My parents had a place in Ibiza, a little apartment which they bought. And actually, thinking back, my very first property investment was me and my sisters bought that off my parents in 1991. 1990, they retired to France, south of France, very nice to visit, and they had this place in Ibiza. We don't really need this place in the sun because we live in south of France now. So I'd forgotten about this, but me and my sisters bought that for my parents on an instalment contract.
Okay.
So we just paid them a bit of money each every month, and over a number of years, we just bought the property. And so we bought it for 10,000, and then we sold it in 2001 sold it in 2001 for about 45,000.
Okay.
We bought it in 90. So in 10 years, it tripled in value, which was a pretty good investment for us.
Ibiza would probably be one of the few places abroad that probably would still be a good investment. In terms of, I'd be interested to know.
It's probably worth now. I reckon it's probably worth 150,000 euros at least.
Yeah. And why you sold it just because you weren't using it, sort of thing?
We weren't using it, you know, and actually could do with the money for something else. You know, so anyway, it took me actually a couple of years to get to 2003 where I'd completely replaced my income, and I realised, Billy, that you know I'd done all right, but actually I'd made quite a lot of mistakes.
Okay.
And also I'd started to invest in myself and my own personal development. Yeah. And that was actually, I went to my first paid event in '98. It was a marketing event. Okay. And I realised, because I had this student nightclub business, and I realised that actually I could put training through my business, which was pretty good. So I pay less tax, that was good. And I kind of got addicted to learning. Okay. And it's very different from the learning you do in school or university, because you see there's actually a use to this learning. And I went to Tony Robbins in the year 2000. I learned all about the importance of an environment and getting people around you. So in 2003, I went online, thought, you know, there must be some sort of group I can join, because I was going to breakfast network meetings where you have breakfast and you introduce referrals. And I met a great solicitor, accountant, mortgage, everyone I needed for my property business. Yeah. But none of them actually had any properties. They didn't really realise what I was going through and what I wanted to achieve. So I went online and there wasn't anything. So in 2003, I set up the very first property investor network meeting. And in fact, it was that pub over there. We're sitting in our offices, and just out there is the Play on Harrow Hotel.
That's where I stayed last night.
It's where it started in 2003, and we now have 50 meetings around the country. And I didn't intend to do that. I never dreamt that would happen. I just did it because I thought it'd be really smart for me to learn from other people and get other like-minded people around me. And what happened was, it was just networking at first. Yeah. And people say to me, Simon, how come you don't have to work? I said, well, I do work. I do my property, my client. No, you don't go to work. So I started standing up and talking what I done, and I realised I liked talking.
Okay.
And then I liked talking about property. And then someone said, well, this is great coming to these network meetings, we're learning stuff, but it's taking months and months. Could you maybe teach us everything in a day? And I thought, it's not going to take a day to teach everything I know. You know, it won't be that long. But I did a day, and I really enjoyed that. And I got great feedback from people. I thought, this is brilliant. And then people paid me for it as well. So that's how the whole training business started. And that's pretty what I do most of my time. I teach people how to be successful investors.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think it's Steve Jobs that talked about it's not until you look back and you see how the dots are connected. So
I'm a big believer in that, you know, and I also believe people, you know, people you meet,
Absolutely.
you come into touch with, sometimes they come back to you. You know, Mike Bristow, who's the CEO of Crowd Property, doing a fantastic job, much better than I would ever do, because that's not what I do. Yeah. I met him when he came to Birmingham University, when I was doing my nightclub stuff. Him and one of his mates started selling tickets for me.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he went off and became a management accountant and made loads of money, and came back years later, came onto Mastermind to learn what property, and then years later came into Crowd Property. So these people keep coming back, right? Which is why you've got to be very respectful of everyone you always meet, and don't you know, sometimes people fall out, right? But don't deliberately spite people, you know, because you never know who you're going to meet later. It's a very small world, this world.
No, particularly in the property business.
It is indeed, yeah.
So if we fast forward now to 2020, I think we're in.
We are.
So kind of interesting times. You know, we survived a Corbyn government, thankfully. Brexit's still out there, though. It's kind of unknown what the outcome will be. Situation with Iran at the moment, that there's, you know, a lot of people say risk and uncertainty. Yes. What do you think it means for the property market for 2020?
So there has been massive uncertainty for the last couple of years. And that has definitely slowed down the property market. I know lots of businesses who say that, you know, they're trying to get investment, things are slowed down. People are very, let's wait and see what happens after Brexit. Now that obviously the UK government had an election and they got back in power, the Conservatives got back in power in December, and they said, right, that's it, we're now leaving Europe at the end of January 2020. And because of the decision, have you noticed there's less news about Brexit now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's that's it, done and dusted. Yeah. Now it's not done and dusted. We're not going to see the full impact for years and years.
Absolutely, yeah.
But, and it definitely hasn't been said, but my philosophy, if you go back to fundamentals of property investing and economics, supply and demand. Yeah. So we live on an island with a limited supply of accommodation and an increasing population. And that means surely over the long term, both rental values and property prices should go up. Yeah. It's a market, so they'll go up and they'll go down. Great. And I believe in 2020, for a few things I'll talk about in a minute, I think we'll see a further dip in prices. Yeah. London's been dipping for a couple of years because it absolutely boomed for like 8-9 years, and quite rightly had to slow down a bit. And I think normally you see a ripple effect from London around the country. That hasn't really happened. A lot of the country is still very strong. Yeah. But I think what's going to happen, not because of Brexit, but because of Section 24, which, just for people who may not know about that, in April 2017, the government decided that they wanted to tax property investors in a different way. Yeah. And so anyone who owns property in their own name, which was the most tax efficient way of doing it, and anyone who's got mortgages, which again was the best way to invest, and anyone who's a higher rate taxpayer, which many investors are because they've got property, are going to pay ultimately more tax. So a lot of people who've got big portfolios are moving into limited liability partnership, then into companies. But we're seeing at the PIN meetings, so now 50 PIN meetings around the country, we're seeing a lot of landlords saying, you know what, I was going to retire in 5-10 years, but they decided to bring that decision forward. So I think we're going to see a lot of landlords decide, that's it, I'm going to sell it, putting their property on the market. We might see a slight oversupply, and still the general public might be very cautious about buying. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think price will get down. But then those of us who know what we're doing, it's going to be a great buying opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I still think of some of my best deals that I got, you know, kind of 2009, 10. Yeah. Post the
once
kind of credit
once every decade, something happens that is a real opportunity. In my memory, the first one was 1998, when Byton went. Now I missed that one because although I was investing, I was playing, I was dabbling. I didn't really know what I was doing. I had no training or education. I was just dabbling, so I missed that. 2008, 2009, after the credit crunch, I absolutely jumped into that one, and many of our students and masterminds bought a lot of property, and most of that property is now doubled in value. If you bought at the right time, right price, it's doubled, which is great. And I think 2020 will be the next buying opportunity. Okay. Because there are so many landlords looking to sell. Now, there's a particular strategy, because I know we want to talk about strategies. There are lots of strategies that work, and we'll talk about different types of things, but one of my favourite strategies, well, actually it's not really a strategy, it's more of a tool. It's a tool that can be used in conjunction with any other strategy. If you want to do serviced accommodation, if you want to do HMOs, if you want to do commercial residential, there's this tool called a purchase option and a purchase lease option. I know you've done several of these yourself, where you basically find someone who's got a property and ideally they want to sell the property, but maybe they want a higher price than the market will give them. Maybe they don't want to sell right now for tax implications or whatever it might be. And so we effectively rent that property from them, take on all the hassle and responsibility for them, then go off and forget about it, and we agree to buy the property in a certain amount of time. Now, it's great for landlords, because if a landlord says, well, I'm going to sell, and they sell all the properties in one go,
we hit with capital gains.
You get a massive capital gains tax. So capital gains is the difference between when you buy a house and when you sell it that's not your own home, less the buying and selling costs and the capital improvements. It's the profit you're going to pay tax on it. At either 18% if you're a lower rate or 28% if you're a higher rate taxpayer. However, if someone phases the sales over a number of years, they can utilise their personal capital tax gains allowance each year of, I think, about £11,500. And if it's in joint names, it's twice that. And so they could sell 1 or 2 houses a year, get that allowance, sell the next couple the next year, and so on. And so maximise the amount of allowances they use. And if we're buying an option, Billy, if you went to buy a house that's worth 200,000 today, that's the market value, you and I probably wouldn't want to pay 200, would we? We'd want to pay, I don't know, 180 or less. We want to get a discount, right? Many landlords are slightly unrealistic about the price they want to achieve. Now I think if there's lots of property on the market, they might become more realistic, and they might think it's going to crash, as they might be prepared to take a discount just to sell it. Or we can offer them a slightly higher price, because we're not buying it now, we're buying it in the future. And today's full market price, if the market goes up, becomes a below market value purchase in the future. So we've got the right to buy for 200,000. In 5 years, it might be worth 250, and we're buying at 200, so we're buying below market value. So we're building in potential discount.
I mean, the first lease option I did, I agreed it at market value. And probably a bit of a punchy one. It was about 130, and the house we closed it in December, in the house in the same street. I think the nearest one was about 180. And that was, it was your year, so it was 2015.
Fantastic.
To now. So I certainly wouldn't have a problem doing a lease option at slightly above market value, as long as you have time. We wouldn't want to do it for 12 months.
No, exactly. You've got to have a long time. And here's the thing, it's a great strategy, it's a great tool for use of any other. You could then use property for service accommodation, HMO, whatever. I know a lot of people do developments, they secure land with a purchase option, they get planning permission, increase the value, then they buy it, or they flip it on. If you want to source deals, securing with an option is the best way to do it.
And we've done that with some of the deals in crowd property.
The biggest mistake people make is they learn about this wonderful magical tool and they try and use it all the time, but it doesn't work all the time.
Absolutely.
It particularly doesn't work. If the seller's selling now because they need money, because they want to clear some other debt, or pay the home off, or pay for their daughter's wedding, or invest in a business, then they need the money now, an option's not going to work. Because they're not going to get the money now. And so people try and do options, but they're not appropriate. They get lots of no's, think, oh, that doesn't work, but they're wrong. It's just they haven't been trained right.
Well, I think it's also, it's kind of, it's recognising the market's cyclical, and I think
absolutely
it's knowing that options will come and go at certain times in the market. So I know people in London who are doing quite a few of them just now because it's been hit hard. People in Liverpool used to do them post City of Culture when the prices fell. And in the northeast they're still very common because the prices have never actually recovered. So I think it's understanding where the market is, but I go back to your point as well about fundamentals. I mean, I listened to a podcast yesterday on the way down, and it was interesting. It was quite a young guy, and he was talking about saying that just thought capital growth is gone, and I would never buy for capital growth. But a bit like what you were talking about, your house in Birmingham, the first one, how much?
When I bought that, that seemed bloody expensive to me.
Correct.
And in '98, when I was looking for my second house, I was looking in Bourneville, where Cadbury's is. And the houses were like 80 grand, and they were all like 50 or so 3 years before. I thought, that's ridiculous, that's way too expensive. So I bought in between the two, it's slightly cheaper. But guess what, those houses were 250, 300 now. So I know it seems expensive.
Well, but if you go back to what you said, it's the fundamentals, unless we change our planning into the green belt. Unless there's something huge happens to the world that changes the demographics, our population is going to continue to increase.
And people worry about Brexit. Now, Brexit, let's talk about that briefly, because when Brexit was announced, quite a few landlords I know who maybe rent to Eastern European, but said that actually some European workers did leave the UK and they've gone back home, because of the uncertainty, which you can understand. But then a lot of stakers, a lot of are ensconced in the community. They've got great jobs, they're in schools, the kids are in schools, and they don't want to leave. And the government said we don't want to kick people out, partly because they probably don't want all the English people to come back.
Yeah, I mean, there's more English people in Europe than Europeans here.
Exactly. So I don't think we're going to see mass exodus. And even if at the end of January 2020 we flood the tunnel, pull up the drawbridge, and no one ever comes to the UK again, we still got increasing birth rates and longer life expectancy. So the population's going to go up.
Yeah, I think I understand the challenges of Brexit, but my view is Norway, Switzerland work fine, Germany, France work fine. You can work in or out. I think Brexit. I mean, I think it's quite. I won't go into here. I think psychology in terms of what it's done to the country and polarized opinions. I think it's quite interesting.
Absolutely,
and I think that's actually more telling than what the actual economics will be.
I completely agree.
It's government. I don't rate any of them, whether it's Union or no. We won't go there. But okay, so lease option is a great way or tool to use in 2020.
Yeah.
What kind of asset class do you favour in kind of 2020?
So there are lots of things you do. I mean, I love HMOs, and I think now, by the way, I think there is an oversupply of HMOs.
Yeah.
Let me just say that right there. It's definitely an oversupply, but there's an oversupply of very average stock.
Yeah.
And so I believe if you have an HMO that's in better condition, better facilities, better decorated, better furniture than other HMOs, you should be able to always fill it. And I think standards are generally getting higher, but that's a good thing for tenants, right? And we should be providing good quality housing, I believe. So I always like HMOs in the right location, there'll always be demand. And particularly when times get hard, if we go into a recession, which some would say could happen, people can't afford to live on their own in a studio or an apartment, and an HMO becomes far more affordable.
Yeah.
Okay? And particularly for my type of tenant, I have young professionals, they might move to a new city. They don't want to live on their own. They want to live with some like-minded aged people who they can connect with, go to the pub. They've got instant friends, instant social life. So I think HMOs, the right type of HMO, the right area will always have a good demand. I think serviced accommodation is really interesting. I don't actually have any serviced accommodation units yet, but I do have a house that I bought in Halifax a number of years ago, and I've turned into 7 flats. Okay. And I've rented them out as 7 flats. So I own the freehold, I own all the flats, and I'm going to test with 1 or 2 of those properties serviced accommodation. If it works well, I'll turn the whole block. And I own the freehold, so there's no leasehold problem. Mortgages are an issue. And I'm just changing the finance to a company who's happy with serviced accommodation. And actually, they've all got planning for C3, their flats, so the planning's all fine as well. Mistake that many people make is they don't understand about leases, they don't have the right finance. And I am concerned that I would advise anyone, if you're investing, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, I have that conversation regularly with people, and particularly at the start, because I know you say that it's still unregulated.
Yes,
and
I tell you what, it is going. I mean, the good thing, HMOs are highly regulated, and that's good because we know what we're dealing with. And in October 2018, they brought more regulation and things, and that's good. The thing is, we don't know what's going to happen with service accommodation, and it will get regulated. And I'm just concerned with some people who something might come in and might wipe out their whole business overnight. So that's the risk with it. But right now, people are making great money from it.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually someone who. They've got a house opposite me, so I actually took it to appeal to get mine from 6-bedroom to 7-bedroom.
Yeah.
Theirs was actually converted into 3 one-bedroom apartments.
Right.
So again, they own the freehold. I don't know what their finance is, but so they're fine from planning. But they actually rent theirs out each flat, and it's kind of like a party pod, whatever. And so 1-bedroom apartments. They put 6 single beds in it. So I'm getting a hassle from the council about going from 6 beds to 7
they're putting 18 people in that building.
They're putting 18.
That's ridiculous.
But I actually spoke to them with the same planning. And they're actually currently they're compliant with the planning legislation because they're renting out all as once.
Yeah. At the weekend. On one AST or short license rather. Yeah.
So they're not breaching any planning laws. But I can. It just seems mad to me that I'm getting hassled from going to 6 to 7 and they can do 18. But as you said, I think some people are making money from it, and I think I think you've got to recognise it's a business and you've got to set yourself up for this.
So here's the thing: it's not a passive thing.
No.
And if you do certificate, you are getting yourself into a new business, and you could make really good money. But unless you have, now it is possible to systemize it and have great team there. But unless you treat it like a business, as systems and process and team, you're giving yourself probably a real nightmare.
Yeah, and even with again, it don't get me wrong, property is a business full stop.
Absolutely, yeah.
But again, I'm like you. I'll use staff. I'll use agents. I want as much of it outsourced as possible.
Because you want your time to do what you want to do, right?
Absolutely.
That's the reason for investing in property.
Yeah. And also people are better at it. I'm good at talking through stuff. I'm good at seeing the big picture. I'm not very good at making beds. I'm not very good at painting walls.
No, same here.
I do inspect my house.
This is a big problem that people get when they're investing in property.
Want to do everything.
It comes back to us saying, they want to do everything, and often the reason is because they think, I can't afford to pay someone else. And what they're not realizing is the time they're spending doing it. You could pay someone, I don't know, £10 an hour to make the beds or clean the house. But if they're doing it, they're valuing their time at £10 an hour, and they're never going to be rich if they're valuing their time at that. It's a great saying from Robert Kiyosaki from his Rich Dad Poor Dad book, that poor people will spend their time to save money, whereas rich people, we spend our money to save time. So we'll employ other people to do stuff for us because it gives us the time to focus on the high value activities where we can make a lot more money.
Absolutely.
And I would say actually going out there finding deals is one of the best things you can do, because you're either getting a great deal or you could sell it to someone else and package it or whatever,
No, definitely. And again, once you get the right people in with a skill set, we've got a great cleaning team, and we pay them a couple of grand now a month, and she's actually been able to create her own cleaning business from it, and her staff, etc., and can clean properly. People can't.
That's another challenge, isn't it? Finding people that actually can clean properly.
No, I honestly think that's probably one of the most key staff that we've actually got.
Absolutely. And it comes down to treating it like a business and recognizing you need to invest in yourself to learn how to. You could say a successful investor before you even came and did any trading with us, but we just gave you that leverage to go to the next level. And I meet a lot of people all the time who don't understand why they should invest in themselves, and yet they're out there trying to raise money from us. Well, my view is, if you're not prepared to invest in yourself, why would anyone else invest in you? Why would they lend you money? You've got to invest in yourself first and become investable and get that knowledge and expertise.
And I think that is one of the challenges. So if it was simple, everyone would do it. But with any business, there is risks. I still believe in property. There's less risks than other business if you do it right. But what do you think are the key things people should do to manage risk in the property market?
So obviously education already mentioned, but there's also due diligence. Some of the mistakes I've made on properties I've bought, I haven't done enough due diligence. And anyone who's got, I'm sure this is the same for you, and who's got a number of properties in their portfolio, bought over a period of time. At the time when I bought them, they seemed like a good idea based on what I knew at that time.
My place in Bulgaria, that's what I thought.
So what I know now, I've got some I wouldn't buy. In fact, I've sold some of those over the years when the new tax changes came in, right? So research, due diligence. It doesn't have to take weeks and months. Once you know what you're doing, in a very short amount of time, you can do due diligence, say, yes, this works. Because if you find a really good deal and you take too long thinking about it, someone else will recognize it and come in and do that great deal. So to be a successful investor, I think you have to be decisive. You become more confident with knowledge, with application of that knowledge and experience. And the first house you do is always the hardest, but you learn so much from that experience. And so sometimes just putting a stake in the ground and getting out, and your first property probably won't be your best deal, but you'll learn so much from it. The next one will be better.
Absolutely, and that's a conversation I have. I think one of the challenges with education now is people are almost kind of see all these different strategies. They hear of no money down. They hear of infinity returns, and it's kind of something like you actually have to earn your stripes. And sometimes you just need to do a deal.
Maybe just use some money. If you've got some money, use it and buy one. You'll learn so much from that. Then get a bit more creative.
And people, I remember some guys I was working with, and they couldn't get a deal to stack because they couldn't get the numbers. And it was kind of like, well, have you got any money yourselves? And we go, we've got a couple $100,000 in the bank, but we want to do it no money down. It's like, well, you're earning 0% there. You're turning down all these deals, and we still do it. I've got a phrase what I call dump cash. When we refinance, we've got extra money, and we're at our maximum potential. This is again when lease options and investors are good to work with. If they'll take a reasonable price from you, we'll buy ready-made deals.
Absolutely. I buy deals from other people.
And a lower ROI because the money's just going to earn 0% in the bank.
Exactly.
And I always say run out your own cash first,
Absolutely.
and then go and raise again.
Always use your own money first, because if you are going to raise from other people, anyone lends you is going to want to think, hang on a minute, does this person know what they're doing? Am I going to get my money back? And so use your own cash to do a few deals first. That gives you confidence, gives you credibility. And then it's quite legitimately go to them and say, look, here's what I'm doing. I've used all of my money. I've got some great deals. I'm looking to get people to give them a great return of money. Whereas if someone says, oh, you want to borrow money, have you got, oh, I'm not going to use my money. Well, what does that say? It's a wrong message, isn't it?
Yeah. And there is something about having skin in the game. No,
absolutely,
agree.
Yeah.
What about your kind of view versus holding stuff long term versus flipping it on?
So I guess it depends what's happening in the market cycle, and it depends what your long-term objectives are as well. I have bought property that I still own, well, lots of what I still own, but I've also bought property that I've then sold on. And usually after a number of years, I've regretted selling it. Yeah. And maybe I sold it because I was only making a little bit of money, but if I look at how much has gone up in capital growth, I probably should have held on to all of it. But the reason people sell property, there are 4 reasons I would sell. When I buy, I want to make sure it's in an area of strong rental demand. Yeah. If something happens, if it goes oversaturated and I'm now struggling to rent it, that might be a good reason to sell. Yeah. That's one reason. Secondly, some markets have incredible capital growth. And actually, if you look at what's called return on equity, so how much you get compared to what's left in the property, it might be worth selling it, paying the tax, telling them reinvesting that money elsewhere to get a better return. And then so that's the second reason. And then third reason is sometimes you just need the money for something else. And you've got to sell. And hopefully not becoming a motivated seller, but sometimes that's there. Or maybe eventually actually change of direction, Section 24, whatever, you say, actually I'm over, I'm getting out, and I'm just selling up. So I would sell for some reasons, but generally I try not to sell if possible. I've been selling a few over the last few years because I was thinking about transferring my portfolio into a company, and there's a cost to do that. And I thought and you've got to refinance when you do it as well. There's no point refinancing deals I don't really want. So I've kind of sold some of those not so wise decisions, and some have made money, some haven't made money, but they've offset each other. And my portfolio is much stronger now, even though it's slightly smaller than it used to be, because I've got rid of the weak stock. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No,
and I think every investor, every year, you should look at your stock and think, okay, I think the idea of selling and selling and selling means eventually you have nothing. But if you sell one and buy something else to replace it, and that replacement is better, that's just fortifying your position.
Yeah, and I think that again goes to what you said at the start. I think that it really is worth doing due diligence, but also being clear. You know, I also exited a couple of lease options that I did that I shouldn't have done. You know, it was about let's just own lots of houses, let's just go and buy them, Bulgaria, LE2 tenants, whatever. Let's just do it, and then kind of realizing, well, they're late. You're not going to get an agent to manage them. Your capital growth is going to be slow. You know, just and it also one's out of town. You know, I had one in Pontypridd, never been to the house. Tenant was in arrears. I wasn't really managing it. It was doing these bigger deals, and it was kind of like just take it back and I'll write it off. And I think it's about trying to take as much emotion out of it as possible.
Absolutely, it's a busy. You made an issue point that I've got to write it off. You know, you got to accept in business. Sometimes you do things that you're going to lose money. You might decide you're going to buy one. You get a survey done, and it's not right. And rather than putting more money in after a bad deal, you say, okay, that hasn't worked. I've got to step away. You spend money on legal fees sometimes. And you expect a business, you've got to invest in the business. Not everything's going to make money, but if you keep going and you know what you're doing, long term, you'll do really well.
But what I particularly like about property as well is the point that it isn't. To me, you get 2 bites of the cherry. So you think like the student market. You know, without a doubt, at one point, I don't know, Google University, Apple University will come in, so the student market will disappear. But you've still got the house. So then it's you can be in a crest of a whale with a student. You can then maybe go and serviced accommodation. You can
repurpose it.
Exactly. You can repurpose it. So it's not like, and that's why I think as a business, in inverted commas, it's easier than most. You know, if you're doing the nightclub stuff, whatever you were doing,
not as many people go to clubs as they used to these days. And I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore. And so you're right. In property, it's much easier to pivot into something else than in a traditional business where
you've still got the asset.
Exactly.
You still got the asset. Okay, that's great. Really appreciate your time and your insight. If people want to get hold of you, Simon, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Okay, so I'm on LinkedIn. So Simon Zutshi, Zutshi. That's an easy way to connect with me. I'm on Facebook. My Facebook page is full, but you can follow my Property Investing with Simon Zutshi on Facebook. And I would recommend, if people haven't read my book, go and read Property Magic. It's a very simple book, and I really that's one of my try and simplify things, but hopefully it'll really open your mind as to how you can invest, and that's available on physical format. I love proper books personally. Yeah. You get a Kindle, and you also get an audio version as well. And also I have a you like podcasts. I've got a Property Magic podcast. Comes out every Tuesday. It's content from the book and stuff I teach on Mastermind as well. It's about 20 minutes, no interviews, just me giving great content every week.
Great, so great ways to get hold of you, and great ways whether you're listening in the car or to get a book.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Great idea, just fill yourself with positivity rather than listen to the depressing news on the radio.
I would agree with that. Appreciate the time.
Thanks so much.
Cheers. Thanks, Simon.